السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نسأل الله إن شاء الله أن ينفعنا جميعا اليوم بالتوبكس اللي راح نناقشها. The speech is going to be merely a coverage of what do we really know about digital banks in general and the roles of the regulator. وبنفس الوقت إن شاء الله راح نحاول نغطي Q&A as much as we can. I don't know if there is an online Q&A. عفوا ما بعيد شوي الصوت. طيب I don't know if there's going to be an online Q&A but we leave a room for that as well towards the end. I think the preference is in English or يمكن العربية أفضل. شاعل إيش رأيكم؟ إيش اللي ودكم؟ ها؟ But I don't think there's a time. يعني ما عندنا وقت نصوت بس I think there is foreigners بشكل عام و expats, so I think we should be covering شوية ال English language. وبالعكس more than happy to address any kind of خلينا نقول terminologies معينة. So again thank you very much for coming and it's a pleasure actually to be part of the overall ecosystem or partnering I would say bodies of whatever we so-called digital banking community in general. A new flavor that came into the overall banking industry recently and got خلينا نقول publicized quite well during the corona times where we've had the need for it. So خلونا نتكلم شوية first of all about the idea of digital banks when it did started. First of all قبل I start by talking على التوبكس على two topics اللي عندنا. Let me introduce myself. جزاء محمد الساري, co-founder and chief executive officer of Vision Bank. Has been a pleasure actually to be part of such an application since early 2019. I remember leaving back a well-established 13-14 years of career and really pursuing this somewhere in December 2018. We've went on with the regulator, continuous discussions, applied for a digital bank license somewhere in September 2019. We've got the approval afterwards, alhamdulillah. And since that time, we were really granted the approval back in June 2021 as a standalone digital bank. Since that time, we're actually in the process of building the bank. We're just around the corner, I would be saying, inshallah, very soon, to launch the bank activities. So this is myself. I come from a corporate banking background, and yeah, I have a big passion for digital banking in general. But per se, خلينا نقول a renovated definition of how do we do banking in general, rather than saying only digital banking or let's say a technology-based delivery. So this is myself. I would thank first of all Saudi Fintech for organizing such a lovely evening and event, and our presence today is just to be part of the overall خلينا نقول participants within the ecosystem to create an awareness and impact, and also to become part of the overall banking community in a renovated way. So first of all, digital banking started somewhere at the back of the subprime mortgages back in 2008. Lots of people do not know that subprime mortgages really kicked off on a global base a need for a renowned way of doing banking. There was خلينا نقول an overall lack of trust in the overall financial system globally post the 2008, and if someone really remembers those days, we used to announce the start of an overall downsize in the or خلينا نقول a downturn in the overall global economy or global cycle. So at the back of that, somewhere in 2011, 2012, couple of خلينا نقول ventures somewhere in the UK and North America started by embracing taking one banking product, re-engineer that, and embrace that. Create some traffic around it, and then embrace that further down the road build upon that, and obviously at the end create whatever we so-called or seen after that is called neobanks, digital banks, or digital incumbents by some of the brick and mortar high street banks. I'll come to each and every one to define it. What are the real differences between them, but at the very same time also it's very important to shed the light of how this idea manifested into what do we see today as so-called digital banks. So they merely started as payment companies. So in a similar fashion to how our colleagues in TC Pay started. They've embraced one banking product. They've said the experience there is quite awful. Let's just re-engineer that, put it in a digital context, offer that on a simplified platform, and gain a momentum behind it, and then push that further down the road and create a further spectrum of products around a core value proposition. So this is how it really started. So they started as not as in general banks, but rather than I would be saying payment companies, or also financial institution platforms that offers somewhere between wallet as a service or some kind of an omnibus solution on top of a current account, where it gets backed by an incumbent high street bank. So this is how they started. So خلونا ناخذ example. Couple of the examples is Starling, Monzo in the UK market, and I would say Curve, Stripe in the US market, as well as خلينا نقول some of the interesting proposition in Asia Pacific, such as Digital Bank of Singapore. It's called DBS. So, and we will shed the light across as we move on in our discussion or speech. We will shed the light on a couple of good examples with their own journeys as well, and see how did they really evolve in their own markets. But it's a very important thing that we also establish one thing. Doing banking also from one country to another is different. What does overlap within the overall idea of a digital banks is embracing technology, but also come up with a renowned value proposition. It's how do you really do banking, redefinition of banking. People get usually misconfused, delusioned some way in the idea of digital banks are powered by technology. That's right, 100%, but that's an enabler. And the real reality, let's say, core value proposition that really makes their own impact stand out from the existing traditional offering is a renowned value proposition, being so much agile, so much young in age in terms of a lifespan, and then definitely making sure to take a much more dynamic calls toward changing a steering of a company. Hit the payment and then move on into remittance. Let's move on into wallets. Those kind of decisions are quite difficult at traditional level. So I would say it was a very important factor that we also clarify that the importance of how digital bank differentiated themselves is by having a renowned value proposition, not only embracing technology. So that's the digital bank idea. What are the types of digital banks? So as a matter of fact, digital banks, I would be saying they started like fintechs. What do we call today fintechs at some stage. And then traditional banks reacted. And then they came up with the idea of a digital channel. And then standalone digital banks came up. And then those standalone digital banks did not evolve into a similar fashion manner to high street banks. So they weren't really, most of them, they weren't really having the right sufficient ingredients to kick off lending and banking per se. When we talk about banking, we usually refer to the very important element of banking, which is net interest income. And the reality is that those fintechs, those digital players, didn't have the sufficient capabilities to launch such a spectrum. So standalone digital banks, bigger later on, came up with the idea of also building their own asset books on the back of a liability base. And then the overall markets globally and even at regional level got really misconfused in terms of the definition of a digital bank. So what is really a digital bank? Is it really a fintech? Is it really a payment company that mimics banks? Is it really a standalone digital bank? Is it really a digital channel owned by an incumbent, or let's say owned by a traditional high street bank? We can debate endlessly there, but let's just refer to the overall regulator's definition over here, and we're really referring to the Saudi Central Bank's definition over here, which came up in early 2020. Standalone digital banks are all about being branchless and embracing the digital journey from end to end, and also differentiating in their own impact the way they want to come into the market. So in my opinion, the Saudi Central Bank definition states the reality of how a digital bank should be really redefined. And if you go to Hong Kong Monetary Authority, you go to Bank of England, you go to states is a very complex situation because of the state law, federal law, and such complex ecosystem there, even in Canada, North America in general. But if we take a look at Hong Kong Monetary Authority, South African Central Bank, and also Bank of England, and compare them to how did our Saudi Central Bank came up with the idea of how do they really want to regulate digital banks. In my opinion, there has been a real definition that really stemmed up from an overall, where digital banking journey has globally manifested into some of the key players at global level. And then I believe we embraced the right definition of what digital banks should be called for. So I would be saying a standalone digital bank that is branchless, definitely embracing technology, a cloud native, and also with a renowned value proposition that have an impact to the overall sector that has been flourishing for years so far. So I would be saying this is the right definition, in my opinion, for a digital bank in Saudi Arabia, and that should be a quite sufficient definition even at a global landscape level. What are the differences? So between those different definitions. So a digital channel is owned by a traditional bank, and we can call that as a digital bank. A good example of that is Neo Mashraq, ABC, Ella by ABC, Bahrain. A good example is also Amin by GIB. So are called digital channels, digital incumbents, embraced by a traditional bank. And also there's another definition, which is a standalone digital bank that has a full capabilities of launching an entire spectrum of products similar to a traditional bank. And there is again the debatable definition of a fintech slash digital bank. We don't usually call that according, again, the definition of Saudi Central Bank. We don't call that as a digital bank, but definitely we embrace that as a fintech and a key disruptor within the overall disruption status that's really taking place within the overall digital banking domain. So those are the real differences between the different types of digital banks. As I said before, digital banks had journeys. Some of the key successful examples actually, for example, we're talking about Starlink of the UK, we're talking about also Oak North, if someone knows Oak North. It's another digital banks. Also, it's very interesting that people usually associate banking easily with retail banking. So if a renowned name for a retail banking is there, will definitely have a by far much more awareness and an impact at global, regional, and even local level when more than, let's say, digital banks who embraces, let's say, enterprise banking in general. So the biggest difference is that Starling is well known for its retail banking activity, a lifestyle bank, but also Oak North is well known of their own, let's say, enterprise banking in general. Another example in the region is WIU in the UAE, if you have heard about that, backed by ADQ, and it operates in the UAE market. It's based in Abu Dhabi. It's a quite interesting journey as well so far for them. A bank that has in excess of 4 to 5 billion in terms of a balance sheet, let's say, on a liability side at least. Another good example as well is also a new bank in Brazil that has over 92 million customers. And when we talk about 92 million customers, we're talking about a bank that has only a lifespan of 10 years versus a well-established 180 years Barclays that has a maximum of 20 to 25 million, according to the last readings of the bank. Even a mighty HSBC. We're talking about a new bank that stretches all the way from Brazil to Mexico, stretches across five countries within Latin America, LATAM, and a quite successful journey so far, 92 million customers. But also, let's shed the light on the journey, the overall journey of digital banks. They got really, some of those big names, they got really carried away with traffic and creating valuation. Some of those digital banks have been led by an influenced investment banking mindset to create a valuation based on a traffic and really not tackle the core activity of what does a bank do? And it's all about accepting money and lending money, which is a core activity that presents a real revenue stream that should put you on the right map towards profitability at some certain point of time. And that's why lots of the digital banks have not got it right when it comes to the profitability roadmap. And a very good example is Revolut. A very good example is also RBS, Bow by RBS, closed in a year. Fen by JP Morgan, mighty JP Morgan. We're talking about an entire digital bank that shut down after 12 months of operations. And it's very important to address that the banking 101 has to be kept within the center, the heart of how do you really steer a digital bank. So definitely embrace technology. Definitely you want to come up with a renowned value proposition, but also you need to embrace the 101 banking. And banking is all about accepting money and lending money, and net interest income is a major key parameter in that. And we've seen some of the key successful also examples. We're talking about, again, I keep bringing this example. It's called Oak North in the UK market, profitable, EBITDA, after 6 months of operations. A bank has a very simple, straightforward operating model. Accept call accounts and deposits from the retail, lend that to SME. And that's quite straightforward way of really making money in a very good way and possibly turn that digital banks into profitability or put it on the right map into profitability. But again, there is also the game of a fee income, and the more and more services you could really extend as far as your own platform is concerned, you could really make lots of impact there. And what usually traditional banking usually struggles with is how much they could really reduce the dependency on non-funded income versus funded income, which is fees. How can they really reduce, the reliance on net interest income versus net funded income or fees business? And this is where possibly, in my opinion, digital banks can play a great key role in terms of being or having an ultimate interoperable application or a platform that could really act in a plug and play mode where you could really either cross-sale, put up a marketplace, provide third-party services, monetize data, so much things you could really work it out on top of a very agile application. But also that agile application has a huge back-end integration, and you need a big journey to do that. Well, also one of the key challenges for digital banks is also a timely consuming, let's say, efforts that you need to have also in order to expose your own technology. Because again, if you want to embrace technology in terms of a big differentiator over here, you'll have to work it out in a totally different way. And you'll have to embrace the hyperscalers domain, because the whole idea, the whole concept is a light business model. So the idea of data center will be alternated by the use of hyperscalers and software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and also the idea of having a branches and high street offering is being alternated by a very dynamic and a very interoperable, again, application or a platform that could have high capabilities versus the overall offering of traditional banking in general. So these are, خلينا نقول, the overall differences between different digital banks ideas or digital banks definition, and also the key differentiator between each and every one, and what does stand each and every one in its own domain. What is the impact of digital banks? I think the impacts of digital banks should be reflected again in the renowned value proposition, a renowned way of putting things in a totally different way. Let's take an example of a remittance business that was embraced by our colleagues in STC Pay, and it's a very wonderful story, always to shed the light upon. And that product was a hell of a use of a product by traditional offering in general. You've had to leave your job, wait for queues, in lines for hours in order to do a one remittance. It's even got stretched to the fact that the offering of remittance was completely isolated from the normal offering of a branch network. So they've had their own branches. But the reality is that this was embraced by STC Pay, re-engineered, put up in a digital way on a application, and it was a success story. And we'll have to all give credit where it's due. There has been a great success story in the way they have embraced such an idea, and it had a wonderful impact on the overall banking sector in general. Just elevated the way that banks needed to compete at digital frontier. And today we're talking about digital maturity level when it comes to the banking sector. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, Saudi Arabia actually holds the top spots in general at global landscape when it comes to being a digitally mature banking system in general. And that's why we are happy actually to be part of that community, inshallah, very soon, and try to further enhance, further provide whatever skill we could really add to the overall, well-established banking community that has a very digitally mature offering so far. What other impacts could digital banks have? In my opinion, being enabled by technology, having a space to maneuver and think of new products. I think it's also, in my opinion, filling the existing gaps of the current market landscape. And how do we do that? Is that by coming up with products that the market does not offer. This is one. Two, better the current offering which is digitize what couldn't be digitized, and possibly elevate the overall maturity of the sector by offering products in a digital manner in a totally different fashion than how do we really used to do it before. What else? I think the word interoperability is very important, and having application that could be really having the capabilities around plug and play with other platforms, extend other offering, and also, let's say, provide different services even as far as your own platform is concerned, is a very powerful tool. But also that takes lots of time to develop. So I think there is an impact massively over there in terms of connecting the non-financial institution into the financial institution domain. It is very important to note that what the non-financial sectors, and I'm talking about every sector apart from the financial sector, misses from the financial sector is one thing. Anyone has any idea about that? What all of other trade, manufacturing, name the sector you want. What do they really want from banking? In my opinion, they want one thing. They want core banking capabilities. It's called account management capabilities, ledger management capabilities. What comes with that is reconciliation, strong reconciliation, let's say, capabilities. What also comes with that is a renowned way of extending a seamless experience. Because what I've just mentioned earlier before, the experience was only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the overall issues that non-banks face in general. Have you ever came across reconciling a few ledgers in your own company and asking for an entire bank statement to reconcile that? It's a hell of a process. You need, some of the companies need large finance departments for that. A huge operational capability and a huge requirement in terms of an overall resources. These are the renowned services that we're talking about. When you offer an entire reconciliation services by extending a seamless experience, real-time basis reporting as far as your current account is concerned, and also provisioning or using or embracing open banking capabilities. At the top of that, you can have an entire spectrum of your own balances across all of banks on the very same spot. And that was a very good reason also for such absence of capabilities also is another major contributor to the overall lateness we usually witness at the beginning of the year, expecting all of the companies to release what? Their financial statements. It takes time. So these are the kind, and that's a purely B2B offering. Some of the digital banks are offering that overseas. Have you ever heard of QuickBooks or FreshBooks? It's offered by Starling on their own platform, used by every business. Starling actually extend their own current account capabilities for. I'm talking about their own business account. And you can have that in a simple subscription model. So these are the kind of impact that we really want to see as far as our existing digital banking landscape in Saudi Arabia is concerned. So, and these are some of the key, let's say, examples in terms of how digital banks usually would make an impact, an overall impact, to create a differentiation or a differentiated factors between them, their own offering, and the existing banking offering in general. And that's only an example. We could shed the light on retail offering. We could shed the light on back-to-back ETF offering, investment offering on your own platform. Today we're seeing a wave of fintechs coming in on the investment side and offering deals, multiple deals in a crowdfunding platforms and a peer-to-peer activity. Those investment opportunities could be extended to the overall banking community in general, who have doing the right KYCs, the right onboarding strategies or methodology in order to make sure that from a back-to-back perspective, those two entities could really work together. Those kind of offerings could be offered. And also, in my opinion, it's a way, in general, to create an awareness on the overall investment under CMA offering, and also reduce the impact of a wave of let's say, due to lack of awareness, a wave of people investing into خلينا نقول اللي هم اللي كانوا يتصلوا على الناس, people who usually calls you and they want you to have a foreign trade, or lots of people got really lost lots of money there by that. But also, this is also a very good example that we can really increase the overall awareness of investment banking in general, what we really offer within the local ecosystem in terms of an investment opportunity. So lots of impact could be created there because of the overall capabilities of how digital banks usually operate, and their own, let's say, capabilities when it comes to technical back-end integration as well. Digital banks versus fintechs. Do you see a competition? We do see a complementary relationship. We want to embrace fintechs. I think digital banks needs to work closely with fintechs and have lots of mutual aspects together. They're both agile, dynamic. Mostly they run on cloud as well. Their technologies are similar. Their back-end integrations are similar because they run in the very same environment as well. In what way? In the same way we've just explained. Plug-and-play capabilities or plug-and-play offering, embrace them into our, or into digital banks marketplace, and offer their services, whether in a profit-sharing mode, in a joint offering mode, or in a sole offering mode as well. It depends. Digital banks could actually act as an incubator for fintechs and further embrace fintechs. We in Vision Bank, we have created our own sandbox. And the idea of our own sandbox is to expose our own services all the way to the wire. So we want not only to expose our customer-facing features, but also expose every service, every microservice that we can really offer on our own platform, whether we own this or not. And those sandboxes could be a great incubators for fintechs to plug and play, test their own offering as far as our environment is concerned, and possibly act as a good bypass also in terms of maturing those fintechs before going into the market, and possibly further enable the ecosystem of promoting and further promoting and helping promoting an overall or a never-ending, inshallah, wave of fintechs that the entire خلينا نقول economy is left and right considering, with different ideas. And it started with embracing peer-to-peer, and now we're seeing different kind of application. We're seeing Islamic products being embraced on it, such as sukuk, such as things that we've never heard under the investment banking domain in general, and even the ones embraced by or being incubated by or being regulated by SAMA. It's great success stories over there in terms of the debt size, the debt side, in terms of the debt side crowdfunding platforms. Great success stories over there. Lots of, we hear a great pipeline being piled up for 2024, 2025, mashallah. So lots of things could be worked out with the fintech domain in general, and in my opinion, digital banks could act in a much more closer form toward those fintechs. And we've seen good encouraging movement also even from traditional banks toward fintechs, and we can only further embrace that as well. Last thing I want to talk about digital banks is the overall ecosystem. The ecosystem is divided between the players, the digital banks, the regulators, the hyperscalers as well. And when we talk about hyperscalers, we're talking about an alternative or a real alternative for data centers, a much more or a by far less costly proposition than a data center. And the whole idea of hyperscalers, when we're talking about hyperscalers, we're talking about OCI, Oracle, we're talking about AWS, we're talking about Azure, we're talking about GCP, Alibaba. Those are the big 5 hyperscalers across the global landscape. And as digital banks, we cannot shy away from the fact that we need to embrace their infrastructure as a service. So we need to usually book up a place over there, create our own capabilities, our entire infrastructure, and offer a very trustworthy operating model that runs on a specific stack and really meets the regulator's expectation. When we talk about digital banks, we should not ignore the fact that banks are 24/7, 365 days a year operating environments. You just can't shut down. You'll have to be up and running all of the time. And this is a banking 101 thing. And the hyperscalers, alhamdulillah, اليوم in Saudi Arabia we have OCI, Oracle in Jeddah, and we have Google, just recently launched on the 15th of November. And they're both qualifies for the financial sector activities in general. And those hyperscalers, it was a very interesting move to see GCP joining in recently. It's a great addition to the market. It's going to only further bring even overseas companies into Saudi Arabia. Yeah. And their overseas cross-the-border movement pipeline, and I'm talking about Google, is already being flooded right now. The kind of request of companies who wants to come to Saudi Arabia. It's quite interesting. They're another player playing a great role within the overall ecosystem, but also act as a mediator and a bridge to bring in overseas players. They come in with their own knowledge, a foreign direct investment, a huge boost for the economy as well. Not only that, elevate the overall competition when it comes to digital banking offering and also fintech offering in general. So if we're going to agree that both sectors are going to complement each other, further companies coming in through hyperscalers is going to only further enhance and better the sector in general. We in Vision Bank, we use OCI and also we use Google. And in general, you'll have to have always a disaster recovery capability as well in order to stand up those services at any point of time. But also, it's very important that those hyperscalers, they would give you a potential, a great capability in terms of go-to-market, which is developing quickly a specific product and really launch it to the market. You would really question and say how. I would be saying by saying, anyone in terms of the fintech who has a product who's available obviously on the cloud, we could easily use that as well in terms of how can we really plug and play with them. But also the overall agile delivery of digital banks and embracing those software as a services, those technologies, the so-called containerization as well, is further only gonna make those digital banks quicker in terms of go-to-market and also reflecting changes as far as their own offering is concerned, and also even reach a status of later on a personalization status, because it would give them a huge also capabilities in terms of data architecture also at the back of the existing overall architecture of their own infrastructure as well. So it's very important also to say that those hyperscalers, being part of the overall ecosystem, played a big role in terms of enabling digital banks to operate and to be available within the overall banking landscape in general. That's enough for the first topic, and I would really shed the light a little bit on the regulators. We're talking about the regulators over here being part of the overall ecosystem, as I just mentioned earlier. And we cannot deny the fact that the most important regulator when it comes to digital banking today is the Saudi Central Bank, and also the Capital Market Authority. But when we talk about digital banks, it's the Saudi Central Banks. When we talk about the investment fintech side also, it's under the CMA. But when we talk about SAMA, we talk about a regulator, a well-known, reputable across the global landscape, of being one of the, let's say, leading central banks across the globe when it comes to having the right policies, the right governance, and also the right enforcement when it comes to the overall banking sector in general, with that renowned, let's say, consumer protection mindset as well. It's very important to shed the light on a regulator who have anticipated ahead of most of the GCC regions to come up with a sandbox idea, to launch a digital banking white paper back in February, exactly February 2020. I think, in my opinion, we cannot say SAMA anymore, Saudi Central Bank. I think SAMA that at the time played a great role in terms of putting up the kingdom on the right map to embrace digital banks, and it's part of the overall digitization strategy of the country, right? It's part of our major 2030, one of our 2030 vision pillars as well. And SAMA, or Saudi Central Bank, not only came up with a white paper, they're servicing 3 applications at the moment. MashaAllah, I can't recall any of the region who's really taking part in such a large number of applicants, digital banks. Came up with a sandbox idea ahead of most of the central banks in general, and the number of qualified entities and the number of entities still in the sandboxes are quite enormous, and really represents the overall aspiration of how the central banks really wants to enable the sector and boost the sector and further enhance the overall competitive. And the overall value should be extended to the end consumer in general, where he gets the best, most better convenient services as well, with the best prices, with the best competitive landscape as well. Ultimately, with the overall manifested digital journeys across every spectrum of products digital banks are willing to offer, or even traditional banks are really willing to offer. And moving from there is how digital banks could really find their way in, is definitely to be navigated and led by the Saudi Central Bank. Been closely working with them. Great job so far. They've been navigating with us, and we've been also led in a way to represent the overall banking sector, to reach up to that level of expectation. We have a very renowned reputation, or a reputable sector, and Saudi Central Bank expect us to reach that level of awareness, maturity, and also, let's say, capability, in order to reflect a key member player of the overall banking community in general, and really add value the way we want to join the overall banking community sector. But definitely, there are lots of things that the Saudi Central Bank also is working upon, an entire rules and regulations for digital banks. And they were gonna suit digital banks in a way where it becomes an overall pavement for, let's say, future applications, if there is any, to come in and further put in the kingdom as one of the countries globally to have embraced digital banks and had seen that manifested in a way that really meets the overall expectation of the sector. Another key regulator is also, in my opinion, Saudi Fintech. And their role as a newly, let's say, newly established body, young in age, but with a great success story, mashallah, quite active, presented by a young generation who wants to embrace the overall fintech domain in general. I would only extend my sincere appreciation to the overall busy calendar that you guys keep yourself with. And it's always very hard to keep up with your own calendar, your annual calendar, mashallah, activities are left and right. But the overall role of Saudi Fintech has been massively established in creating the overall awareness around fintechs, digital banks. And this event is only one part, in my opinion, as an example to demonstrate and prove that. I think further greater role is being played by the overall events that you guys invite those key players together and have a networking events around that on an annual basis as well. Saudi payments is also a key player within the overall regulators domain. Saudi payments is a great success story by the Saudi Central Bank. At the time of the span-off, so far, mashallah, we've seen a great company that came forward and really influenced the overall global landscape when it comes to payments. We'll have to give credit where it's due. A very good story is being told these days around how did Apple Pay came into Saudi Arabia. If anyone knows, so usually Apple, when they move from one country to another, they used to use their own wallets as a payment, a key payment methodology. And Saudi Payments stood and said, you can only use it on to the top of Meta. And in my opinion, such a role being played by a payment provider has been demonstrated as one of the key decisions ever to be made, as-salaha, within the overall financial institution sector in general, or payments, in my opinion. And Apple Pay had to do it in the first time across the globe on top of Meta Wallet. And then I think other central banks, payment providers across the globe started embracing that. I think the story goes on that the Canadian Central Bank as well did the same, and some of the European countries as well. And again, we're talking about a regulator with a vast experience around that, and a great track record. We've been closely also working with Saudi Payment in general to certify our own RTGS, our connectivity with the overall banking system, which represents the overall spine of the bank, which is responsible settlement organ of the bank. Then now we are engaged with them with the overall certification process, and soon, inshallah, we will be completing our own entire offering fully certified by the Saudi Payment before we could really go to the overall market launch or public launch, inshallah. This is it, more or less, I would say. I hope I did my best to cover digital banking topic. That is a topic that cannot be covered in 1 hour, an hour and a half. And also, even the role of the overall regulators landscape in Saudi Arabia. But also, I wanted to shed the light on what do we really actually know about digital banks from overseas, and also regionally and even at local level as well. And I hope we have also provided you with an enough amount of information in terms of making sure that we create an overall awareness. And also, I'll be more than happy actually to leave some room to address your own questions if there's any. Thank you very much.